Hey everyone, got a really important and useful chess secret to share with you today, which will guarantee improve your game, and that is that everyone's a dumbass. That's not to say that some people don't play brilliant games, sometimes perfect games, but every now and again we unleash our inner dumbass. And the point of all of this is that you need to be ready to pick up, because your opponents, right, doesn't matter what level you are, you might be a grandmaster, your opponents will make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. We are human. We are not deep blue, stockfish, whatever. It happens, but you have to be ready for it. So one of the comments that I get quite often, like I post these games like the Punishing Dumbass opening series and stuff like that, and people are always commenting, well, I never get this when I play against an 1100 or against a 900 or against a 1200, like that. My opponents don't make mistakes like this. But guys, here's the tough fact, right? Yes, they do. It's just that you probably miss it, okay? And I think this is particularly difficult when you're playing against somebody who's higher rated, right? Because you think, oh, well, that looks like a blunder, but there must be some trick, so I'm going to do something else. So I've got two games to share, right? Now, in this first game, I think I played with an accuracy around 26, something like that. My opponent plays with an accuracy about 75, something like that, right? Anyway, so we have a Sicilian, and I'm playing the wing gambit at the moment, a3 and knight 2c6. So the point of these games is to show you that everyone is, it doesn't matter how well you're playing, how badly you're playing, the inner dumbass is always inside there just waiting to jump out, right, and take part in the fun. So here I play d4. That's not the best move. Computer wanted me to capture here, but I do that, and now d5. And now I decide to push on with e5, making life difficult for my opponent getting his knight out. We have e6, and now I come out with my queen. Now, this is very unprincipled, not very sensible. I mean, I'm still defending that pawn, but I've got ideas of tying this bishop down. So I don't want this bishop to be able to come out, right? And so my opponent now plays g6 in order to relieve his bishop. I develop a knight, he develops a knight, kicks the queen, queen moves, and now obviously I'm attacking the knight, so again the bishop is tied up. So the knight moves up the board, I bring out my bishop and pin his knight, he attacks my queen, and here I decide to capture. All right. So here's the situation. I've put my queen here on the same diagonal as another undefended piece, which is my own dark squared bishop. Okay, now, which is a mistake on my part, and my opponent realized it. Okay, he was reading the board and he saw the mistake. Simple as that. Okay, so I've got a few options. I mean, one is, for example, I could sidestep and then I will lose the bishop. Okay, and that'd be -3 for me. Or I could capture his bishop, knight recaptures, I recapture, so I've got two minor pieces worth 3 each and lost a queen worth 9. So it's the same in terms of, numerical value, it's the same, but the difference is that I'm going to have a bishop here on h6, okay? Then my bishop can come in here and annoy this rook. Then the rook's going to have to move there, right? Then my bishop could come here and annoy the queen, okay? So I decide that the best option is to have more pieces, and so we have this trade. Now he takes my pawn, I recapture with the rook. Bishop comes out, I annoy his rook, I come back, I annoy his queen has to move, okay? Now this is an issue now because the queen's moved here and it's attacking that bishop. So I slide my rook over to defend. Queen moves with check, I play knight d2. So actually at this point in time, my pieces are actually fairly well coordinated. Right? Knight's defending that, that's defending that. Knights are defending each other. Rook's defending the knight. Rook's defending the bishop. The pawn is defending the rook. The only piece that isn't really defended is that pawn there. Okay, so I'm feeling okay here. I was ready for this move, rook down to b1, because it's defended by this knight. Okay, so this is why, in many cases, you know, like we say that it's generally frowned upon to trade like a bishop and a knight for a rook and a pawn, even though the numerical value is the same. Having more pieces on the board can be a good idea, right? So, plus my opponent's rook has been forced to move, and he's going to find it difficult to castle. Okay. Queen now moves to c3, where it is attacking this pawn. Okay, so I retreat my bishop, and now we have a nice situation where both bishops are paired up with pawns, right, on their shoulder, and that means that these bishops are actually defended, and so are the pawns. So it's a nice situation to be in. He now comes in because he's got two attackers on this pawn, grabs a pawn, and I decide to castle, connect my rooks. There's a hanging pawn here on b7, we notice, and if he wants to trade off knights, then that's all fine. Actually, I think here he'd be better off capturing the pawn, and if bishop recaptures, queen recaptures. So he had a free pawn there, but he decided to trade knights instead, which suits me. I've got two bishops now on a fairly wide open board, so I'm not giving up hope just yet. Now the queen comes in now, so I had a really good think at this point, nearly 2 minutes. So I'm thinking, come on, Hunty, read the board, right? These bishops are actually quite solid, and neither of them can be dislodged by pawns, right? I could think about maybe doubling up my rooks somewhere, but then also my opponent has got a queen and a rook as well. Now this rook's actually pretty stuck for the time being, because the king can't move there or there because of my bishop. Okay, so he can only go here, but then he can't move there or there because of the bishop. So that bishop is really like a bone in the throat. So to develop this rook, he's going to have to push like h5, h4, rook there, rook there. It's very slow. Okay, so now I bring my knight into d5, and we have bishop a4. I play my knight now to b5. So I thought about that for 12 seconds. Now my opponent on his next move takes 1 minute 13 seconds, right? And plays a6, right? My opponent is playing far more accurately than I am. My opponent is up 5 points in material. My opponent just blundered his queen with a king-rook fork to boot and resigns the game after spending 1 minute 13 seconds. He's rated 1481. Okay? It's just a dumbass move. I'm sure that he would agree that it's a dumbass move. You know, it's just a stupid blunder. It's a stupid mistake. People make stupid mistakes. We are human. It's only a game, right? But the point is that I actually sat there for 50 seconds thinking, surely he didn't just do that. And he just did, right? Brilliant, wonderful, complete dumbass move, okay? That's it. And he lost the game, and, you know, that's chess, okay? The point is, are you open to the possibility that your opponent, even if you respect your opponent, which you should, right? Even if you fear your opponent, which you should a bit, right? They can still never deny them their basic human right of being a total dumbass. Okay, now, on to the next game. And this is a beauty. So my opponent here is rated 1563. And we have a Vienna. Oh, Vienna. Now, I love this opening. Endless source of entertainment, this opening. So we have bishop c5, the Andersen defense. And against that, we play queen h5, the wayward queen attack in the Vienna, right? Which is great fun. So the queen comes out to f6 to defend this pawn, because that's the actual target there. Knight out here is also playable, in which case you'd bring out your bishop and, you know, pay your attention to that. Knight to f3 here I think is the correct move. Pushes a pawn, and now obviously knight to d5. Knight to d5, real pet move in the Vienna, attack the queen and c7 at the same time. So the queen has to retreat, can't go to e7 has to go all the way back to a starting square on d8. Okay, so now I've got this very healthy lead in development. We have d3 because I want to release my dark squared bishop. Okay, bishop comes out, threatening the knight. Out comes the dark squared bishop, now threatening the queen, and there is no f6 because this pawn is pinned, so this pawn can't move. Right? So what does he do? I mean, he's not going to want to put his knight out to here, because then I've got like knight takes, pawn takes. He just didn't fancy that. He doesn't want to mess up his pawn, so he just sidesteps with the queen, which I think was actually a decent move. b4 now is played. And the point here is that although my knight's under attack, the bishop can't capture the pawn because the knight's defending the pawn. Okay. Now, if he takes my knight, I will just take his dark squared bishop, right? And then his light squared bishop will also be under attack. So I'm really trying to keep on the front foot here and maintain the initiative. So he captures my knight with his bishop. I capture the dark squared bishop. Light squared bishop is still under threat. He retreats. Now there's a little bit of calculation here that I think is worth sharing, which is, you see this pawn is hanging, okay? But I figure if he captures here, I can capture there, and I improve my knight, right? And I'm threatening the f7 pawn, okay? Now if I initiate the exchange, he recaptures, and he's still got a pawn defending here. So I figure, actually he's not going to want to capture there, because he doesn't want the knight coming in with this horrible threat here. I mean, it could be checkmate straight away almost. Okay, so I develop my bishop to e2, getting ready to castle. Okay, and he doesn't capture, which is sensible. So he develops his knight, and now I capture. Now I have a hanging pawn here on c2. What do? Push c4, right? Cut off the oxygen supply if I can for this bishop. Material is equal. He comes after my queen, I retract the queen. He comes after my bishop, I retract the bishop. Now b5, and now I castle. Okay, but I'm feeling pretty good. Look how safe my king is here, right? His king is kind of threatened. Now there is it's starting to get a bit suffocated around here. The space is starting to close in, and I'm thinking I kind of need to get my queen out of trouble at some point. So he captures on c4, I recapture, bishop captures, and that was an error on his part because I can now pin the bishop. Remember this tactic, it's a useful one. Now, he could defend with a pawn, but then I simply captured the pawn. Even if knight recaptures, doesn't matter, he's going to lose the bishop, right? There's no other piece that can get there to the defense of the bishop in time. So he has a poke at my queen, and this is a mistake on his part, because the defender of this pawn is actually pinned. Right? He can't recapture. So I grab it with a bishop. He figures it out, brings out his queen. I'm not too bothered, I just grab the free bishop. So now I'm up a piece. We trade queens, very happy to do that. He grabs a pawn. I line up my rook against his king and attack the knight at the same time. Knight retreats. I improve my knight now to here, taking advantage of the fact that this piece is pinned. Pawn on e5. Comes in with a bit of an attack, throw in the check. Knight improves again. Rook comes in. I am unconcerned. Knight takes d6, defends the bishop. Right? He pushes a pawn. And now I threaten to trade rooks. Okay? He can't go there. Right? The only options for this rook are forwards, backwards, or here. And then I've got rook d1, and I force a trade of rooks. So we trade rooks. Okay? And now, I mean, you'd choose white any day of the week here. King g7. The computer didn't like this move, but I just wanted to simplify, right? So I throw in a check with a fork on the knight, so we're going to force a trade of knights. Trade knights. I have the bishop pair against a knight, his rook stuck in the corner, right? Happy, happy days. Knight comes out. Here I could have again simplified but I decide I want to keep the bishop pair if I can. It could come in handy. And I retreat to here, right? It's defended by the rook. Now, same tactic that we saw earlier on. My opponent pins my bishop. And for some reason here, out comes my inner dumbass. Now I've got options here, right? One option is I could play my bishop to h5, and as long as I keep it on this diagonal, my rook is protected. And then my bishop is free to move, okay? For some reason, I don't think of that. And I decide to trade off my bishop for his knight. And now the king captures. Also, it has to be said, taking one step towards my bishop. That's all the king has to do, is make his way over here, and we find ourselves in an ending where we've both got a rook, we've both got 4 pawns. I've got a 3 and a 1, and he's got a 1, 2 and a 1, right? And now I decide to push g3. Along comes the king. Now, if I'd have been able to check the king on the e-file, I could have moved my rook with check, the king has to move, and then I move my bishop to safety, right? I didn't have that option. I moved my... So basically, I've lost the opportunity to save my bishop, and the bishop falls. Now I pin the king, skewer the king. King moves, we trade off, okay? Now, this I think is a mistake. So I'm trying to improve my king, kind of get it here. Okay, but basically, I'll show you the moves. The point here is not to go over the endgame in too much detail, but we have some trades of stuff, and we end up in a situation like this, where neither of us really wants to move. Black's king can't go too far away from this pawn, because I can capture. But, you know, we do a lot of counting on our fingers and toes and stuff like that. And eventually he does go away from this. And obviously he can't push the pawn because it gets captured. So then we have a race to the line. Now, key thing to remember here is the promotion square, right? We are both 5 steps away and it's my turn to move, okay? So I'm the one who's going to get a queen first. But look at where my king is in relation to the promotion square for black, right? So we have a race to the line. We both get queens, right? But his comes with check, right? If my king wasn't on this long diagonal, right, this one, then I could have basically won the game by continually checking black, moving my king up, and trying to capture the pawn and win the game. As it is, it turns out in a draw by agreement, okay? So I'm in a completely winning position and I just blow it, right? It wasn't too much of an error to allow my bishop to be pinned. There was a way out, but I buggered it up because I had a dumbass moment, right? We all have dumbass moments. So I thought that was interesting. So the lesson in this is never allow yourself to think that your opponent is infallible. You simply can't afford to do it, right? Your opponent will occasionally or frequently, depending on your ratings, okay, unleash his inner dumbass, and you need to be ready for it. So this is what almost like, I think we should actually add this to the checklist, right? Why did my opponent make that move? Was it a dumbass move? I think should now be on the checklist, because how many times have we gone, oh, you know, I just made this move that I was thinking about. He'd hung his, you know, rook or whatever. How many times have we all done that, right? Stop it. Stop doing that, right? And the other flip side of it is to use the checklist yourself to check whether the move that you're about to make is a dumbass move before you make it, right? We're all very, very good at figuring out that we just played a dumbass move, but if you can figure out, right, that this is a dumbass move before you actually make the move, guess what? You'll do better at chess, okay? So try it, guys. Take this with you, right? 2 things to remember. did my opponent just unleash his inner dumbass, right? And secondly, is this move a stupid ass move? But ask yourself that question before you drop the piece, okay? You can hold it over, but don't let go and go, is this a dumbass move, right? And if you go, oh dear, and you can put it back. We don't play touch move. Doesn't matter if you're on mobile, tablet, desktop, online. You can move your piece and wave it around if you want, right? You can do that. It's fine. It's absolutely fine, right? So before you make a move, ask yourself, is this a dumbass move? And if it is, try and find a better one, okay? That's it. You'll get better at chess. Your rating will improve. You'll have more fun. Thank you. You're welcome. See you soon.